Hi everybody, this is a very important video and I'm going to share some information here which everybody needs to wake up to and get active on now. These are not the times for just casually absorbing information and failing then to act. And the most important thing that we need to do at the moment is everybody needs to stand up for our human rights, and in particular our children's rights. And for the people of Britain, remember, we are living in a country that our police are actively encouraged to ignore children's crime reports and even medically evidenced children's crime reports, and that is a very, very serious issue of concern, that a medically evidenced children's crime report is completely ignored and doesn't even warrant basic police procedure such as Pace Code G. This is happening in Britain, a supposedly highly developed and civilised nation. So if that's happening in Britain, then what is going on in the rest of the world, and especially a world that is under very heavy influence of Britain and America, all these nations that are presently supporting the rollout of 5G in every single nation. And this is a really serious issue, and it does relate to the reason why in Britain every town and city are having all their trees chopped down. Now in Sheffield, Sheffield Trees Action Group, STAG as they're called, evicted me from their Facebook page because I shared information directly relating the rollout of 5G to the sudden decision to remove, I think it's 75% of Sheffield's trees are to be removed over the next few years or so. They are in many cases replanting with saplings, which we know will take years and years to grow, and are unlikely really to flourish in a 5G residential area. You know, I mean, you're talking a nationwide grid that they plan to put these 5G posts, and often they actually look like trees. You know, this is asking you to spot the difference, which is the cell phone tree and which is the real tree. Can you tell which of these circumstances is real, which is fake? You see, here you are, you fake trees. And they do want these everywhere. You know, you're not talking just residential areas, we're talking about in the forests, in the woodlands. They want absolute nationwide coverage. Okay, and this video here, which I'll leave you the link to, he's Bulletin, does a lot of videos. There's also Mark Anthony in Gateshead, where they're having a trial run of 3G in Gateshead. He's exposing the issues there. There's Deborah Treveras, who I strongly recommend you listen to as well. You know, there's also Ian R. Crane, who is speaking out against this, really to alert people, because we are talking about a serious risk here, and we are dealing with a consciousness that supports Agenda 21 and depopulation, the Georgia Guidestones. It's all written out. This isn't a conspiracy theory, this is a conspiracy fact. Okay? There's a big difference between a theory and a fact. The conspirators are operating on a theory, on a philosophy that calls itself Zionist. Okay, and in turn claims to be Jewish. Okay, well, the only fact of Jew in that word of a Zionist being Jewish is the ish, because they're certainly not Jews. True Jews do not support usury. Jesus was a true Jew, and he supported human rights, and in doing so, he also promoted universal law that upholds our human rights, universal law of abundance and compassion. And the usurers condemned him and persecuted him, and we're told ultimately killed him. And then they again usurped the concept of Jesus to create Roman Christianity, which we all know what that amounted to. Basically the Spanish Inquisition, which is about as far removed from Jesus' teachings as you could ever be. And in the same sense, the so-called Zionists are as far removed from Yahweh as anybody could ever hope to be. And we do need to understand that even the title Zionist itself is a theft, because true Zionists are Rastafarian. Robert Nesta Marley, he is basically the epitome of a true Zionist, which again is about as far removed from the so-called Zionists and so-called Jewish Zionists as you could ever get to be. So throughout, for the remainder of this video, I'm no longer going to refer to these Zionists as Zionists, because they are not Zionists. They are actually fundamentally anti-Christian. That is what they are. There's no getting away from that. Examine their philosophy. Fundamentally racist, sexist, you name it. They are eugenicists, and they're in fact closer to Hitler, to Nazi philosophy, than they are to either Judaism or Christianity or Islam. And we all know that these Antichrist funded agencies do also fund and train and recruit and feed the consciousness of so-called ISIS rebels, which are literally destroying the Middle East, that mainly are targeting Muslims. You know, Muslims are the ones that are suffering the terror and horror of this antiquated so-called Muslim consciousness that is now being rolled out across the Middle East and being used as a tool to subjugate the people to antiquated living, basically. You know, women immediately stripped of their rights, men given a so-called right to marry an 8-year-old girl. You know, these are the things that are going on. You're talking about people being dragged out of the 21st century and condemned to 650 AD. Okay, that is what is going on. And at the same time, Western populations being encouraged to condemn all Muslims as potential terrorists, and even by the antics of the Antichrist, so-called Zionists, actually Antichrist, and that is what I shall refer to them as, Antichrist, from now on throughout this video. So then the Antichrist antics, who are claiming to be Jews, are then inviting condemnation of all Jewish people, when the fact is that Jewish people are just as much a victim of the Antichrist consciousness as everybody else on this planet, and including the life of our planet. And in this case, you know, even our trees, and we need to be very wary of a technology that requires us to chop down our trees. Okay, I mean, that alone is a very serious issue. In order for this technology to be implemented, every town and city in Britain has to lose a vast portion of its trees. Because trees block the cell phone. So, you know, and it is harmful for trees. A problem of coverage, how tree policy cripples mobile phones signals. You see, so I'm sorry, controllers of Stag and all the people who are involved in Stag, I strongly suggest that you Carefully examine the people who are controlling your group and ask yourself who these people are, okay, and why they're evicting people like myself and even Ian R. Crane for making the connection between Wi-Fi and trees, because, you know, this is the Telegraph here, and this was in March 2015. A problem of coverage, how tree policy cripples mobile phone signals. 36,000 mobile masts are struggling to pick up signals because of trees that operators were obliged to plant. Okay. There you go. So the trees are blocking 3G, because this is 3G signals. They now want to implement 5G. And the thing is that even if they kept all the trees and they implemented 5G, people would very soon notice the effects. Okay, people would very soon notice the effects of these trees, that it has on these trees. Now, I'm just going to get a couple of things up here, which, see if it's here. I can't find the study. Here we go. 6-year study proves wireless kills trees. And you know, I've shared this study before in its full entirety. I can't even find a link to it now on Google, because Google is systematically removing truth from the internet. Any truth that speaks out against the Antichrist controlled corporate agenda, because don't forget, the Antichrist, it's the Antichrist's banks that are funding these corporations. They choose what technology to implement. They choose what technology to shelve. And you can guarantee that any technology that benefits life will always harm their profits, and they will always shelve it. This is the effect. I mean, I could show you the impact on study after study of every tree studied. There's the tower, there's the impact on the trees. Imagine what it's having on the birds and the bees. Well, we don't need to imagine it. We already know that it is impacting them. So, here we have scientists and doctors demand moratorium on 5G. The International Society of Doctors for the Environment support a 5G moratorium. They're calling for a moratorium on the deployment of 5G in the European Union. We believe it should be unethical to ignore the available evidence weighting a possible posterior demonstration of health damages in the presence of a present and potentially manageable risk for public health. Thus, in the respect of the precautionary principle and of the World Health Organized principle, health in all policies, we believe suitable the request for a standstill for the 5G experimentations throughout Europe until an adequate and active involvement of public institutions operating in the field of environmental health will be effectively planned. Okay, these are doctors and scientists. Current ICNIRP safety guidelines are obsolete. All proofs of harm mentioned above arise through the radiation is below the ICNIRP safety guidelines. There you go. It's been signed by more than 230 scientists. This is serious information that the BBC should be covering. This should have been BBC headline news. This should have been the headline news in our newspapers. But instead, what are we getting? Stormy Daniels and Donald Trump. And I put it to people, that is the sole purpose of Donald Trump. He is there to implement more of the insane anti-Christian agendas, and as a huge distraction for the world while this kind of stuff is going down. And again, the Antichrist actions in Israel and Palestine. Because remember, they call themselves Zionists, they're not Zionists, Rastafarians are Zionists. These are the Antichrist. They are fundamentally anti-Christian, and that makes our Parliament and our Queen, they're operating in high treason by colluding with the Antichrist, with anti-Christian people. Okay, because our country is a Christian nation, and our Queen is, as head of the Christian church of our nation, well, she's the Pope. She's the equivalent of Pope and Queen, isn't she? Because she's the head of the nation, but she's sovereign head of the nation, but she's also sovereign head of the church. And yet she is colluding. They're all colluding with Antichrist, anti-Christians, and giving them immense power. They're letting the Antichrist control our bank. They're letting Antichrist corporations run our children's homes and prisons and manage all the CCTV footage in our cities and towns. They're responsible for security. They have invited the Antichrist private military corporations into Britain, who are available to be hired by our government. So our government could hire, theoretically, could hire the Antichrist private military corporations like G4S and Dynacorp to fight against the British military. Do we understand the risk here? When a government can hire a private corporate military owned and funded by an Antichrist, anti-Christian consciousness, that they have the power to do that. So that is a threat from within against our own army. I'm talking serious, serious stuff here. And people, you do need to wake up to it. Because this is a far more serious threat than your lone, crazed terrorist. Or, in our case, in Britain, usually British intelligence funded terrorists. False flag events. And we've witnessed recently what's happened in Gaza, the continuing atrocity that's happening in Palestine. And yet our country is still upholding sanctions against Cuba. But no, the Antichrist of Israel actually have a lobby. The Israel lobby. They actually have more power over our politicians than do the British people. And that is outrageous. That is treason. Because we're dealing with a fundamentally anti-Christian philosophy. And, you know, so what does it mean to be anti-Christian? Basically, to have no compassion. Because that is what Jesus upheld. Compassion is the head cornerstone of universal law. That's why it upholds life rights, our human and children's rights. You remove compassion, then what have you got in its place? Ignorance. Ignorance of compassion. That's what these Antichrist, so-called Zionists, that's what they give themselves rights to do. They apparently have a right to ignore their compassion. And the more they can ignore their compassion, apparently, the stronger they are. The only people they need to show compassion for is themselves. People like them. Now, Jesus opened the door of forgiveness, and although the people I'm calling Antichrist may take that as a judgment, I'm sorry, it's just the truth. It's the truth. That is what you are. You people calling yourselves Zionists at the moment. The truth is, you are anti-Christian. If you don't like that truth, then Jesus gave you the option of abandoning evil and standing with love. And that means accepting forgiveness, embracing your humanity, and standing with the life of earth that is requesting in a lawful way, we are requesting our rights. We are requesting that you please stand with us and join us in our universal being of humanity. And for the sake of the child, for a future for the child, we request kindly that you stand with us. And, you know, people need to understand that, you know, loving our enemy does not mean allowing them to control our nations, to control our money supply, to impose austerity on us, to impose a criminal and unrepayable eternal debt on our child, on our children and their children and every generation thereafter. It does not, loving our enemy does not include allowing them to just randomly implement dangerous technologies that have not even been tested and that are known to damage our trees. If they're damaging our trees, what are they doing to us? Well, cell phones now come with a warning, don't they? Don't put them too close to your ears because of the rapid increase in brain tumours and even in children. It's a very, very, very serious issue. We cannot keep ignoring this. And as I say to the members of STAG, get with it and start questioning the people now that are telling you that the removal of Sheffield's trees has got absolutely nothing at all to do with the plan to implement full 5G technology that will operate like a grid. There's no escape from it. You're talking daily radioactive microwave radiation at massively increased rates. And even the scientists of Europe they've done this paper because there is evidence. There is the evidence. I'm sorry, you can't ignore this study, but these anti-Christian corporations they will ignore, because that is their head cornerstone, ignorance, just as they've ignored compassion. The truth is compassion, isn't it? The truth tells us we would like this, please. A nice healthy tree on a healthy planet with a healthy humanity. But ignore the truth that is compassionate, and let's just ignore the results of the profitable technology. The main profit of it, it's not in money, it's in control, it's in the Agenda 21, depopulation. It's a barrage, another added burden on our collective health. Don't forget, we're already suffering under the effects of Chernobyl radiation and now Fukushima, which has bathed the northern hemisphere in, you know, very highly dangerous radioactive particles. Alright, you can't see them, but they're there, and they are going to impact randomly various individuals. Cancer in this country, in Britain, is just rising at such a rapid rate. It is just terrible, you know. And what we're dealing with are people that have put their wallet where their heart should be. People in power, people in the councils, people in government, people in various ministries and authorities throughout Britain, people in the police even, and in the military, and even in the NHS, that people are putting their wallet where their heart should be, because that is the Antichrist. That is the Antichrist. They have replaced their heart with a lump of gold, basically. Well, the true gold of life shines from universal golden light intelligence that created us to be intelligent beings and to make an intelligent choice, because the universe does not need nor require slaves. It has to be our choice to live humanely, to live lawfully, to uphold the law, to stand up for our rights, That is the way we love our enemy. Because our enemy, once they've destroyed us, who else have they got left to destroy except themselves? They are a danger even to themselves. So, you know, that is the way we love our enemy as Christians, is we stand up for our human rights. And we bring sanctions against the Zionists, so-called, of Israel, who are the Antichrist. They're not Zionists. Bob Marley, he's a Zionist. God bless him. Okay? Jesus was a Zionist. Prophet Muhammad is a Zionist. Anybody who stands up for human rights and law are Zionists. These people calling themselves Zionists are just pure and simple criminals, Antichrist. That is what they are. Read their philosophy. They believe that only Zionist Jews, as they call themselves, have any rights as a human being, and all other people are animals, cattle, for them to control and dispose of as they see fit. They are the gods on earth, apparently. They are the Antichrist. They're controlling our medias, they're controlling our businesses, our lives. The independent businessman, where was he? Where was he? The socio-capitalist society that the British people after World War II had established in Britain supported the individual businessman. He and she was allowed to operate. You know, it wasn't a socialism, because, as I've stated before, we're not ever meant to be socialist or capitalist. That is a division that is very, very harmful. It's imbalance. We are meant to be both socialist and capitalist. The two need to work together. That is the way that we survive. That's what thrives. Nature is a socio-capitalist. Otherwise nothing could survive. Life cannot survive without the social. We are social beings. And yes, of course, we profit from our work. But that profit, when it's done in a socio-capitalist society, is a benefit and advantage to everybody. There's more advantages and benefits than there are disadvantages, because everything that we do, including rolling out new technology, demands thorough investigations, as these scientists are rightly saying. And thank goodness, thank you to these professional people who are living up to their humanity, and they are doing the job that really our government should be listening to these. Our councils should be listening to these people. But who are they listening to? They're listening to the Antichrist corporations. And why? Because they do control the World Bank. These Antichrist corporations, this Antichrist consciousness that has persuaded countries like Britain to borrow trillions to bail out their criminal banks who've just robbed people of their pensions, of everything, their trust funds, their homes, their jobs. Oh, it's now become a norm in British society for people, working people on 0-hour contracts, to intermittently find themselves queuing up outside food banks and worrying about whether or not they're going to be able to keep their home. Working people living on the street and in cars. It is outrageous. And why? To support. But this madness is allowed to be because, like I say, our leaders, everybody has been persuaded to put their wallet where their heart should be. And, you know, like I say, this isn't something that can be ignored. If Wi-Fi harms trees, what about children? This is a question that we need to ask, because our anti-Christian controlled government isn't going to ask it. Our anti-Christian serving queen isn't going to ask questions about it. until we start asking questions, until we demand, and then that then empowers the good people in every power to be able to stand with us and say, yes, we are really upset about what's been going on. We've been gagged, we've been afraid of losing our jobs, because people are slaves, we're wage slaves. People will do whatever job is available, you know. By the way, there's jobs, come and chop down the trees. Yeah, I need to pay my mortgage. So once you've chopped down all the trees, where's your job then, people? These are short-term solutions. It isn't a sustainable employment, is it? Just chopping down trees. You people doing these jobs need to ask yourself. Until we lay down tools, until we say no, we are not going to work for the Antichrist. There's no getting away from it, Zionists. That is what you are. You people who call yourselves Zionists, you are not Zionists. You're not Jews. You've usurped the Jewish faith in exactly the same way that Rome usurped Jesus and turned him into the Spanish Inquisition. You know, Jesus did not arrive on earth in order to train humanity into cannibalist human ritual sacrifices, okay, and to participate in that. He came here to deliver the golden light of universal intelligence that gave us a universal law of abundance in compassion, that upholds our human rights, that promotes a socio-capitalist society, that supports women and children's rights, that speaks out against, condemns slavery. We've had the hypocrisy rammed it down our throats for centuries. From the very beginning, when a so-called Christian nation decided it could go into Africa and make slaves of the native people there, and condemn them as savages and inferior human beings. From that very moment, we have been living under this evil power. And our way is not to attack it with bombs and bullets. Our way is to righteously stand up and speak out for reality, for our children's future, to call a spade, to call these people calling themselves Zionists, to refuse to accept that label, because it is not true. It is a lie that they call themselves Zionist and Jewish. And the only truth there is the ish. They are ish. They are not Jews. They are not Zionists. They are anti-Christ. And the true definition of Zionism is found in Isaiah, which according to Isaiah represents the female consciousness, the female intelligence that has been subjugated and degraded and oppressed for centuries by this usurer consciousness that Jesus himself spoke out against. And that's why I've appealed to the true Torah Jews, the true Jewish voice of peace. Please now stand with Jesus as a true Jew, because he very bravely stood up for human rights, and exactly the same consciousness, usurer, antichrist consciousness that stood up against him is exactly what you Jewish people are speaking out against today, just by the very fact that you stand up for your human rights. You know, it isn't us who are the anti here. We are the pro. We're pro-human. We're pro-law. We're pro-justice. The people who are usurping us, controlling us, they are anti-human, anti-rights, anti-Christ. And so, you know, what can I say? Until people start accepting the truth, accepting the facts, accepting the concerns are genuine. This isn't a joke, okay? This is serious. Accepting the agendas behind the actions that are going on today, accepting the fact of it, not telling people, oh, go away, you're a wild conspiracy theorist. No, that is, sorry, the people who believe that everything's fine and that everything that this so-called New World Order consciousness is doing is fine and good, and that there's nothing insidious or dangerous about it. Well, I'm sorry, it's you people who are living in a wild conspiracy theory. You're living in the Antichrist conspiracy theory, that every human actually is cattle unless they're a so-called, as they call themselves, a Zionist Jew, actually Antichrist, unless they're an Antichrist Jew. You know, and that's not to say that the Jewish people that embrace Jesus then need to become Christian. Islam embraces Jesus. What person of true faith could not accept Jesus as a true representative of the Son of Man? Who would not? Which religion would not accept Jesus? There's none. No true religion would refuse Jesus. In fact, he represents the core of golden light intelligence. We're a diverse species. We're always going to have we're always going to be multiple faiths, but every faith can adopt and incorporate universal law, just in exactly the same way that every faith has had no problem adopting and absorbing the Antichrist's money system and its so-called civilization. So, you know, this is a wake-up call, and I will leave the links here to everything that I've shared. I please ask people, please be aware of what is going on and understand that, you know, this is the effect. These trees were screened from the Wi-Fi. This is just ordinary 3G Wi-Fi radiation, okay? Look at the impact on the saplings. This isn't a joke. This was from 2010. They've known. And so imagine what the impact's going to be of 5G. Imagine how it's going to impact on our bees and the birds and all the insects. Please, please, please think about what it is going to do to our children. Seriously, I can't say any more than I've said. It is time to remove the Antichrist. I'm sorry if you can evict Russian diplomats over the obvious false flag event that happened in Salisbury with this alleged Russian nerve gas, then I'm sorry. Now it is time to expel the Antichrist corporations, the Antichrist lobby that is in Parliament. That is what Parliament has accepted. There's no two ways about it. You've accepted Parliament, an anti-Christian lobby. Well, my grandfather gave his life for this country and he was a Christian. And I am disgusted. I am upset to witness what has happened to my nation, to witness what's happening in Palestine, to just be part of what's happened to Iraq, all done in my name as a British citizen. And I am sick to death of it. Okay? And I speak as somebody who's had a direct connection with universal golden light being. So, you know, for me, it's not a choice of whether I believe or not. It is a question of what I know. And what I know, I'm sharing with the people of today. Because I care about life. Because I care about our planet. Because even I care about my enemy. Because I understand that they just are. They're way outside of their human remit. And once we step over those bounds, that's it. You're talking anarchy and chaos. And the only thing is that it's highly organised. You're talking about highly organised crime. That is what is happening. That is what 5G represents, is highly organised crime. Nuclear power, the same. Highly organised crime. Putting our life, our planet at risk. As I speak, the Pacific Ocean is dying. There's no two ways about it. Nobody's talking about it. Oh, apparently we can leave that problem to our children. We're leaving quite a lot for our children, aren't we? We're not leaving them much by way of wealth, real wealth and resources and opportunity and hope. What we're leaving them is pollution and debt and hostility and hate and terror. That's our legacy, isn't it, to the next generation? That's why my granddad gave his life. Men like my granddad gave their lives to fight against the Antichrist consciousness. To stand up for our human rights. They all gave their lives, didn't they? So that their great-grandchildren and grandchildren could suffer an even worse fate than that under a power, even worse than that they thought they were fighting against. In fact, this level of crime that's happening in the world today would have been unimaginable. The people of that day to even understand, to even believe that it could ever be. You're talking worse than 1984. It's even worse. They want to bathe us, literally, in very high levels of radiation. So, you know, I know this has been a long video, and I really thank you for taking time to listen, and I do hope you'll share, and I do hope that you'll share the videos and look into this 5G now, and please speak out against it and understand the agenda behind the removal of our trees. Understand it is not a mad conspiracy theory, it is a fact. Okay? And everybody wants this 5G. Suppose it had been established in Sheffield and all the trees hadn't been taken down, and everybody would witness the trees dying, and that would alarm people. So, you know, there is a method in their madness, and to the people presently earning a living at doing this, and you know, I do understand you're a slave. You need to accept you're a slave. You need to be asking yourself, where do we draw the line here? Where do we draw the line? Like the miners had to do when they went on strike and had no wages for weeks and weeks. That they were prepared, you know, because that is what it is going to take. Like Gandhi said to his followers, unless you're prepared to literally sacrifice your life, then don't bother following me. Because it is going to take our stubborn refusal to accept this anti-Christ consciousness. That's what we're dealing with. Are we a Christian nation or are we not? That is the thing that we need to ask ourselves in Britain today, because what we decide in Britain, it does have an influence on the rest of the world, and we need to understand that this country, in our name, what it has been inflicting on the rest of the world against our wishes and on behalf of the anti-Christ consciousness that today calls itself Zionist and has set itself up in Israel and claims to be acting on behalf of Jewish interests. Well, Jewish people, you just look at what they've done to that land and ask yourself, does it really reflect Yahweh?